Hi, welcome to my first speed paint of the year. Today's subject is Morrigan from Darkstalkers. I'm making a horror movie inspired poster like fan art. So here I'm just starting with the sketch. Some people ask how I do anatomy. For this pose, I took a photo of myself doing a sort of walking type pose. For subtle poses like this, I like to take a photo of myself or stand in front of the mirror and do the pose. I find subtle poses a bit more difficult than dynamic, stylized poses. So I like to take a photo of myself. So I use the warp tool to change the proportions of the legs because I'm quite short. I have short legs and Morrigan is kind of more, she's like a model. So I have to change the proportions with the warp tool. Here I'm adding in the bats. So she's going to be surrounded by bats. So I just block those in. Here I add in her outfit, just sketching it in. Here I'm adding in her hair. I'm doing like a kind of wind-swept, stylish situation with her hairstyle there. So for the bats, I'll refine them later. I'm just getting the general shape of the swarm of bats behind her. And she will have some bats in the foreground and the background. Kind of jump there and I refine them a little bit there. So the ones in the background are more like a silhouette and the bats in the foreground will be a bit more detailed. So here I'm going around and blocking in the tones. So I use the lasso tool and the pen tool to make selections and block this out in gray tones before I shade. I do this so it's easy for me to make selections when I go in and shade. So I can make a selection in the skin area and shade it in the hair area. And when I shade, I don't go outside of the lines. It's just makes selecting things easier. So here I've got two layers. I've got a shading layer with a multiply blend mode set, and then I will have a light layer with an overlay layer set, and I'm going in and doing the shading on the multiply layer. So I'm sort of going for an uplighting style because it's supposed to look a little bit creepy, a little bit dramatic. So I have very dark shadows in the back, and the light is supposed to look like it's shining up at her in an upward direction. So I'm using a rectangle shaped chalk brush to do this and a airbrush shaped eraser to erase. Here I'm just adding some highlights to that overlay light layer. Not too much, just in some focal points like the shininess on her suit and on her face and on her boots as well. If you have trouble doing shading or lighting, I recommend having a reference. I've referenced a lot of horror movie posters that have very dramatic and dark shadows, so it's good to have something like that as a guide for how dramatic to go with your lighting. So here I'm just adding the back details to her tights. I just use the warp tool to shape it to her legs. So now I'm repeating the shading and light layers, but on the foreground bats. So same idea, there's an upward lighting sort of directional light going on with these. So I'll add in the shading first before I add in some highlights. I'm just adding some background details. So I'm trying to have a dramatic sort of effect with something that kind of looks like rain. And it's supposed to be quite painterly looking in the background. So here I'm moving on to the colors. For this piece I'm using gradient maps. So I select the area I want to color and assign a color for the darkest value and colors for the lightest value, the left being the darkest end and the right being the lightest end. And Photoshop will do a smooth gradient between the colors that you pick. So this is an easy way to add color, especially if you like doing muted colors like I do. And I go through to each portion and assign a gradient map. So on the left here, I have one of my references. It's a Vampirella book cover. I just really like the background color on this cover. So after I've done the gradient maps, I am refining the sketch layer a little bit, and on a new layer set to multiply, I add some subtle colors. So the cheek blush and some teal color to the hair is on a multiply layer on top of where I've done the gradient map. So here I'm tidying up the hair sketch by using a dense chalk brush. So it's not airbrush and it's not like super hard because I still want that kind of painterly look. So here I'm adding in the typography. On the left you can see the sort of horror movie posters and book covers that were inspiring this. So I tried to learn from how they did the typography. So a lot of warping and arching of text, a lot of caps lock for the taglines here as well. So I tried to get a nice composition going. I also added a border to make it look more like an actual poster. And I added like a stroke and a drop shadow on the text, as well as coloring some of the text in this like darker kind of oxblood red to make it a bit more dramatic. One thing I also do is throughout this process, I look in the top right hand corner in my thumbnail view just to check the composition to make sure this piece stands out if you were looking at it from far away. I also duplicate the sketch layer and blur it, then drop the opacity to give this kind of blurry, hazy look. And so we are done. What do you think? I did make a couple of changes after I stopped recording. So on the final version, I have added a folded paper texture. So you can kind of see the seam around her chest area and on her shin to kind of look like the poster's old and has been folded. That was just using a paper texture and applying I think it was a color dodge or a lighten blend mode to give that effect. I also added some extra text on the right hand bottom side there just to balance out the composition a little bit more. So let me know what you think. I really like Morrigan. I really like Darkstalkers. I wish that it would come back. That was like my whole campy parody sort of like idea, because this franchise has been dead for so long. So I thought that was so cute. And I really like vintage horror movie posters. I think they're just so, I don't know, they're just so nostalgic and cool. But yeah, I hope you like this video. Let me know what you think, and I will see you in the next one. Oh yeah, and please follow me on Instagram and Twitter, and I have a website, kumans.com, if you want to see all of my prints, and please sign up for my free newsletter for latest deals and stuff like that. Okay, bye bye.